I need you to stay with me here, because what I'm about to tell is something a government said about itself. In August 2022, 8 years after 43 college students vanished in Mexico, the Mexican government's own Truth Commission released a report. It said 3 words: a state crime. The Mexican government, about itself, said those 3 words: that the disappearance of 43 students was not a cartel crime, not a local police problem, not a terrible tragedy that nobody saw coming. It was the state, the army, the police, the politicians, all working together. And then, when that same government was supposed to arrest the soldiers responsible, they promoted some of them instead. Let me tell you the story of 43 students, and the government that made them disappear, and the father named Mario, who has been looking for his son Cesar for over 10 years, and hasn't stopped, not for a single day. Before I tell you what happened to them, I need you to know who they were. Because here's the thing, and I want to say this clearly, the news covered this story for years, and almost every report started with the politics, the cartel, the corruption. Almost nobody started with the boys themselves, and that matters, because if you don't know who they were, you won't understand why what happened to them feels so specifically, deliberately cruel. The Ayotzinapa Rural Teachers College is in Guerrero, one of the poorest states in Mexico. Kids who go there are mostly from indigenous families, rural families, families where nobody has ever been to college before. These students, the commoners, they're called, they weren't going to be stockbrokers or politicians. They were training to be rural school teachers, to go back to the communities they came from and teach kids who looked exactly like them, kids the government had mostly forgotten. Cesar Gonzalez Hernandez was one of them, 19 years old. His dad, Mario, a corn farmer from a tiny village, saved up everything he had to give Cesar a shot at something better. The plan was simple. Cesar becomes a teacher, comes back home, changes things. On September 26, 2014, Cesar was one of about 100 students who boarded buses in Ayotzinapa. They were heading to Iguala, about 120 kilometers away, to commandeer more buses for a protest march in Mexico City. This was a tradition. The students always borrowed buses. The bus companies knew it. The police knew it. Everyone knew it. What nobody knew, at least nobody who was going to tell the students, was what was waiting for them in Iguala.
All right, so here's where I need you to pay very close attention, because this is the night, this is the sequence of events that every Mexican knows, and almost every version you probably heard has gotten something important wrong. The students arrived in Iguala and started commandeering buses from the bus station. Ordinary, routine, the kind of thing these students had done a dozen times. But at around 10 p.m., local police surrounded their convoy on the highway and opened fire. Not warning shots, not crowd control. They shot at buses full of unarmed students. 3 students were killed immediately. One of them, Julio Cesar Mondragon, was found the next morning with his face completely removed, his eyes gouged out, his face skinned. He was 22 years old, and that detail right there tells you something about the level of violence, the kind of message someone was trying to send that night. The other students, 43 of them, were taken, loaded into police vehicles, and then they vanished. The Mexican government's first answer, the one they called the historical truth, was simple. The students were handed to a local drug gang called Guerreros Unidos, killed, incinerated at a trash dump, and their ashes thrown in a river. Case closed, said the government. Don't ask more questions. There was one problem. The forensic scientists said it was physically impossible. The fire at that dump was not hot enough, not long enough, not large enough to incinerate 43 bodies. The Argentine forensic anthropology team, internationally respected, independent, said the government's story didn't match the physical evidence at all. The government had just invented a story and dared everyone to prove it wrong. Now, this is the part that barely anybody talks about. And I genuinely believe if this detail was in every version of the story, the global reaction would have been completely different. Investigative journalist Annabel Hernandez, one of the most important journalists in Mexico, spent years on this case. And what she found, published in Preciso, Mexico's most respected investigative magazine, was this. The buses the students were commandeering weren't just ordinary buses. One of those buses, the fifth bus, the one the students grabbed at the last minute, was a regularly used narco transport bus, stuffed with heroin, ready to move to Chicago. The DEA's own investigation confirmed this. A drug lord called El Machomo, a leader of Guerreros Unidos, had heroin hidden inside that bus. The students accidentally grabbed a drug shipment. And when someone important enough realized students were about to accidentally drive a drug shipment out of town, they made a call, the kind of call that gets 43 people killed. But here's the part that makes this a state crime, not just a cartel crime. And this is the detail that the Mexican military does not want you to know. The 27th Infantry Battalion of the Mexican Army was stationed in Iguala. Their soldiers witnessed the attack on the students. They watched it happen in real time, and they did nothing. Worse than that, the Truth Commission, the Mexican government's own people, concluded that an Army colonel named Jose Rodriguez Perez gave the order, not the cartel, an Army colonel, to keep 6 of the 43 students alive in a warehouse for days, and then kill them. 6 students, kept alive for days, in a warehouse, by soldiers. And there's one more detail that I want you to sit with for a second. When investigators later discovered there was actually a military intelligence officer embedded at the Ayotzinapa school, monitoring student activities for the Army, they checked the roster. They compared the spy's identity. He was one of the 43. The Mexican Army had an undercover soldier at that school. That soldier went missing with the other 43. And the Army, instead of reporting their own man missing, said nothing for months. Let me take you back to Mario Gonzalez, Cesar's dad, the corn farmer who saved everything he had so his son could become a teacher. After September 26, 2014, Mario stopped farming. He couldn't. Every day that he wasn't looking for Cesar felt like a betrayal. He joined the other parents, the Caravan of 43. They called themselves. They traveled Mexico. They went to the United States. They went to the United Nations. They marched in front of the presidential palace. They didn't stop. In 2022, when the Truth Commission released its report, when Mexico officially said, "We did this," Mario was standing outside when they announced it. A reporter asked him how he felt. He said he felt nothing, because feeling something meant accepting that Cesar was dead. And Mario wasn't ready to do that. Not yet. Maybe not ever. As of the making of this video, only 3 of the 43 students have been positively identified through DNA, tiny bone fragments. 3 identifications in 10 years. The man the government accused of designing the cover-up, former Attorney General Jesus Murillo Caram, was arrested in 2022. He is awaiting trial. The Army colonel who allegedly ordered the killings? Still not convicted. Several soldiers charged are on house arrest. House arrest for a state crime against 43 students. Mario Gonzalez still looks for Cesar every day. Here's what I keep coming back to with this case. The Ayotzinapa story isn't really about corruption. I know, bear with me, corruption happens everywhere. Every government in the world has corruption. This story is about what happens when the very people who are supposed to investigate the crime are the people who committed it. When the army is the killer. When the attorney general is the cover-up artist. When the government's own Truth Commission has to investigate the government. What do you do with that? Where do you go if the system itself is a criminal? How do 43 families get justice? How does Mario Gonzalez look for his son when the people who know where Cesar is are wearing uniforms? I genuinely don't have a clean answer to that. I think that's the most honest thing I can say. This case doesn't have a resolution. It has a father who still farms corn in Guerrero, still waits for a phone call, still carries a photo of a 19-year-old who wanted to be a teacher. If this story hit you, and I think it should, I want you to do one thing. Leave a comment below. Tell me, do Do you think Mexico will ever deliver real justice in this case? I want to know what you think. I read every single one. And if you want the next Mexico story, because trust me, there are more, subscribe, because we're just getting started.